Justice Fryberg, you've gone out with a bang, established with the government over its presumption against bail. You said it was after remarks by the Premier in an ABC radio story. What were the remarks?
I can't recall them verbatim, but the way it was reported gave the impression that the Premier had commented on how the particular case, or there were two cases, ought to be decided.
So you think that it went beyond mere political posturing?
I don't know what the Premier actually said or did. I only went on the ABC radio report. As you probably know, I did ask for some evidence to be put before me about that, but no one ever did.
You were worried about what people might think about your decision after those comments. Can you articulate what you meant by that? What the public might make of any decision you came back with?
I was worried that if a decision was given in favour of the Crown while those comments stood and weren't explained, that a reasonable member of the public might think that the court had been influenced by the comments.
You've been on the bench for near on 20 years. I'm imagining there's been lots of occasions where politicians have taken a shot at your rulings. Why was this one so different?
It wasn't really so different. There was one several years ago where Premier Bligh made some comments, and when I came to deal with that case, I asked the Crown lawyer for an assurance that it had no application to the particular case, and on that occasion the assurance was given.
Oh, so you were surprised that the Crown didn't make such an assurance this time?
Yes. Yes, we adjourned for 24 hours in order to let them find out what had happened and, if necessary, call evidence. And I was expecting they'd come in next morning with an affidavit from, say, a press secretary or someone saying that the Premier certainly said nothing about this particular case. He was commenting on things in general.
He also said that judges were living in ivory towers when there had been a couple of instances where bikies were allowed on bail.
Well, I don't know precisely what he said about that, and I'm not going to comment on anything in particular that he said, but it's been said of judges for decades that they live in ivory towers, usually by people who don't know any judges. It's just not the fact. Judges live in the community, not in gated communities, but in the suburbs all around the city, like everybody else. I live at Paddington. I go down to the local shopping centre on Saturdays to shop in the supermarket. I go to, as I said to someone else, I go to the fruit shop to buy my fruit. I go to the newsagent to buy my newspaper and do the sorts of things that ordinary people do and meet ordinary people. It's just unreal to say that we're living any differently from anybody else.
So you think that you are reflecting the community's views, or is there another set of standards that you have to follow?
No, I'm not reflecting the community's views in my decisions. I'm applying the law. That's what my oath requires. I must do justice according to law. And that's the only thing that I can apply.
What did you make of the Court of Appeal then effectively reversing your decision, saying there is no risk that the integrity of the court can be called into question?
The Court of Appeal's decision actually is very flattering because it basically takes the idea that in their view, the public esteem for Supreme Court judges is so high that it's not possible to imagine that a reasonable member of the community would draw the conclusion that any decision was influenced by the Premier's remark.
You mentioned the Premier Bligh anecdote earlier. Do you feel that judicial independence and commentary on judges' rulings have gotten worse? They're the same, better?
I don't see anything wrong with commentary on judges' rulings after the rulings are made, after the case is over. Everyone's entitled to do that, and why should politicians not be allowed to as well? I think they are quite entitled to comment on judicial decisions, particularly ones that affect the community more widely. They have to be circumspect about it if they are in high office, because people can draw the wrong conclusion. But there's been a set of conventions about how members of the Cabinet refer to the judiciary and judicial decisions for many years, just as there's been a convention about what judges say and do in relation to the Parliament. In any system where there is a separation of powers, there'll obviously be boundary areas where things get a little grey, and that's where the conventions play a very important part.
I read your remarks in the case we were talking about after Campbell Newman's comments, and I'm wondering, was there any point you were thinking about holding him in contempt of court or scandalising the court?
No.
So
no.
It's just simply you were going to stay the proceedings until it all blew over?
Well, until it was clear that there was no risk to the integrity of the court. And I thought that wouldn't take very long. The interesting thing was, of course, that all the fuss happened on the first day of the hearing, when I adjourned for 24 hours to enable the Crown to consider their position. I've never seen such fuss over a 24-hour adjournment that wasn't opposed by someone.
Why do you think that was?
You would be better placed to answer that than me. I'm not a media expert.
What do you make of the fact that the Crown then dropped it altogether?
I would dearly love to know the reason why. There's been no explanation given. As far as I'm aware, it was reported only by the ABC that it had been dropped. I'm not aware of any reference to that in the Murdoch press, and I have no idea why it was dropped.
They would have given you a reason, wouldn't they?
No, they just filed a notice of discontinuance in the court, and that's that.
So, okay, so it's all over then?
It's all over. I mean, the bail review application is all over. Mm. Obviously, the fellow still has to come to trial.
Now, were you given the running on this because you're retiring?
No. It's just that I happened to be the applications judge that day, and that's how it fell out. And
did the Chief Justice speak to you at all before, during or after reflecting on this particular incident?
No, the Chief Justice was away in Singapore at the time it all happened.
And since then, has he, spoken to you and said, maybe Justice Fryberg, you should have handled that a little bit better or differently?
No. No.
There's a school of thought that you perhaps should have just taken this in your stride. As in, you're a judge, you've got independence. Did that cross your mind?
Certainly, you try to avoid undue sensitivity. Judges should not be wilting violets, and I'm probably more thick-skinned than most. If it had been a personal attack of any sort, I probably would have just brushed it off. But this was, it seemed to me, something that went to the institutional integrity of the court.